Igbo deity be rendered ineffective? Today's topic is, can an Igbo deity or one on an Igbo they will say this deity, this spirit is ineffective or that is your. Now, we have, as an Igbo, we've gone through a lot of religious discrimination, whereby when the Europeans came into an Igbo, they began to socialize us, our ancestors, their offspring, and us, the descendants. They began to teach us that what we are venerating, that is just mere idols. And because it is just a mere idol, it is not worthy of our veneration. It is not worthy of us worshipping it. Therefore, we have to abandon those deities, those cosmic beings that are indigenous to us, and switch to their own version of who and what God is. Now, because of that, we went through a period of spiritual destruction, whereby the church, through their emissaries, the priests, the pastors, and people that call themselves whatever, ministers or brothers, or decarism, they went ahead, they went from places, house to house, destroying ancestral shrines in the name of family liberations and even more, the removal and destruction of ancestral shrines and deities. They also concluded that the only reason why this thing is possible was because of the ineffectiveness and powerlessness of these deities. And because these deities are powerless and ineffective, especially when they are being faced by a higher religious Christian European god or deity, who made it possible to nullify the power of the traditional deity and made it possible for them, the priests and emissaries, to come and pick it up and destroy it, therefore liberating the people. These are the arguments that they made. Now, today, we have grown as Igbo. I can look at us as more of a conscious people. And what are the qualifiers or characteristics of conscious people? It means that we can now begin to ask the relevant questions. We can now ask the questions. Can an Igbo deity or an African deity, because this also extends to Africa as a whole, is a situation whereby so many indigenous African society abandoned their traditional worship in place of the religion of their colonizers. And also, currently, the amplifiers or people that maintain these religious institutions are now descendants of these oppressed or the oppressed. So it's now trying to raise another question. Can an Igbo deity or can an African deity be rendered ineffective by prayers? Because that's the modus operandi. This is how they operate. They come into your place and they tell you how you denied this deity, this god, and you say yes, and they now said okay, they now sprinkle water, they call holy water, and they now go ahead to remove those shrines. But because our consciousness is now more evolved from an Igbo cultural standpoint, can we now answer this question? Can an Igbo or African deity be rendered ineffective? Now, before I get into everything I have here, that I've written down here, I'm going to make a point from what I know. Now, every deity that was instituted, whether in a community or within a lineage, was brought in because of a particular function. Because the general disposition of our ancestors as at that time was that they were dependent on spirits to grant them their heart desires. So it becomes a situation of, if you want food, pray to your God. If you want it to rain, pray to your God. If you have an issue, pray to your God. Our ancestors were able to create a multitude of deities that they perceived were responsible in granting those things. So when you now talk about Anyanwu, Oshimiri, and all these deities that we know, their functions, you will see that it is tied towards one thing, the provision of a particular thing. Now, because that was the general disposition as at that time, our ancestors, before they brought in those deities, they went into an agreement with those deities. They told the deity, if we bring you into our family, into our lineage, into our land, this is what you're going to do for us. And the deity in return accepted on a condition that you are going to give me this in return. It is not human sacrifice. They said they're going to give me, maybe yearly, you're going to perform this festival for me, monthly, they're going to sacrifice this animal to me as a form of appreciation. And generally, the members of the community said, no problem, we agree. Now, an instance is this deity in Uto in Nsude. This deity, he was a man that was deified. He went to wars, he won wars, defended his community, but he was now afflicted with leprosy. When Uto was affected with leprosy, the community abandoned him. So what happened here was that he was sent into an outskirts of the village where he lived out the rest of his life and he died. But his spirit was angry because he lived, in fact, for the fact that he was even affected with leprosy was one of his mission to defend his land, his father's land. So his spirit was angry and restless until the people came together and they deified him. Today, they now have this ceremony of Nkwa, Eba Nkwa. It's a festival that celebrates a man that was crowned as a god, or a man that was, they deified him. Now have some shrines, you now have, so many histories surrounding him. Now, what the religious people did, because they were aware of this foundation, of the agreements that our communities and our lineage had with these deities before they came to perform these functions for us, they were aware. Now, what they did is, when you see every family liberation, it comes with a period whereby they will ask you to denounce the deity. And because you are a descendant of the people that brought in that deity, if you say you do not want this deity, the deity is under no obligation to function for you. So it now gives them this free hand to pick up an effigy that represents a deity and not the deity, because a deity is an energy, it is a spirit, and energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. So what they did was they would now pick up an empty shell, effigies that represent that deity. They would pick it up and destroy it, and they will now come under the illusion to tell you what we have destroyed, and we've destroyed the shrine, and then maybe go more, that we've set you free. And the people are now living under this illusion that there is some sort of a power tussle between the deity and the religious Christian God. I'm going to do maybe another video where I will tell you that even if this Christian God exists, it has nothing to do with us because of one singular fact. We know that deities are an aspect of the creator, no matter what the religious people are going to tell you. So let me get into, can a deity be rendered ineffective? Now, central to the cultural landscape of the Igbo people, we have the existence of numerous deities, and each is associated with specific aspects of life, nature, and the cosmos. Like I said, different functions. A deity, more, it exists because it is here to perform a function. And these deities, Alose or Aroshe or Aropose, whatever your community call it, are believed to possess immense power and influence over human affairs. However, a question that often arises is whether an Igbo deity can be rendered ineffective, or can it lose its potency. Now, we're going to explore it. But first of all, let's understand this concept of Alose. Now, deities, I prefer to use the word deities and not gods and goddesses. I don't believe that the word gods and goddesses exist. We see them as deities and more, or we know them by a particular name. We know them by their name, their specifics. So I don't use the word gods and goddesses. I believe that it is just a Eurocentric interjection. So Igbo deities are seen as intermediaries between the creator Okike and human beings. Each deity governs a specific domain, such as Akwale Omomo. Don't talk about Akwale. We're talking about fertility. We're talking about progress. To be fruitful, to multiply. Now, the next one is Udo. When we talk about Udo, we're talking about justice. When we talk about Ekwensu, we're talking about war, bargain, crossroads. And we're not talking about Ajani. We're not talking about the Mother Earth. We're not talking about nourishment. We're not talking about morality, etc. We have numerous deities that we say that we are in charge of different aspects of our life. Now, these deities are revered and they are appeased through rituals, offerings, sacrifices, and each of them ensures harmony between the physical and the spiritual world. However, these spiritual entities, the efficacy of these deities is believed to depend on various aspects that includes our faith, our devotion, or our devotion to them. Which means that if the church wants to destroy a shrine, it is meant for us to say, no, you will not do it. We'll come together, we're showing a level of devotion to them. So their potency depends on the faith we have in them, our devotion to them, the purity of the rituals performed. And so, how do you preserve yourself? You that is the Akajofo, the chief priest to this deity, how do you maintain the sacred ordinances, the sacred principles that ensures that you are going to be in good standing with this spirit? And also the adherence to the traditional norms and taboos. And so, these are the factors. They are the factors that would increase or decrease the potency or the efficacy of these deities. If you don't preserve their moralities, their taboos, their norms, whether it comes from the community or to them themselves, if you don't preserve it, you are diminishing the efficacy of such deity. If you don't preserve, if you don't preserve yourself before you perform some stuff of rituals, using the deity as a conduit, then you're going to diminish its potency. Then I've talked about faith and I've talked about devotion. In our indigenous society, or in our indigenous and traditional beliefs, it holds that deities are eternal and they possess inherent power derived from the creator. Now this is where the concept of chi comes in. Many people might not really be aware, but you see deities and more the same way I myself, I have this higher self that is in constant communication with the creator. The deities also have this aspect of the creator within them. So what happens here is that when you're coming to talk to this deity, you're also communicating with that higher self. Your higher self and their higher self becomes it forms a relationship. And they now try to take these affirmations to the creator, who now helps to provide it for you. That's the Igbo perception, the Igbo ideology, how we see things. This is why I will now tell you that deities are eternal and they possess inherent power that they derived from the community and amplified or diminished by human actions. Now these powers, while religious emissaries will tell you that they have perfected the act of Ibubumu, therefore they have destroyed the spirit in question. Why they have perfected that lie? Now we also need to understand that these powers are not diminished it cannot be diminished by the actions of this priest and this reverend. But what happens here is that it becomes inaccessible to those who do not uphold the necessary rituals and those who do not respect it. This is why if a chief priest is known to have soiled himself and the deity says that it needs this person to be removed, the moment you replace it with another person who is upright, then everything falls in place. When you go to deity to ask for something, it is going to manifest it. This is because the deity becomes inaccessible. That energy becomes inaccessible to the people or persons that disrespected it. At the same time, when we now come to a community or to a family, they've said, oh, we've removed this ancestral shrine. Oh, we used to keep it here. But you see somebody going to that same spot and using, kola nut. Somebody with has like a good heart and good intention uses kola nut and goes there and drops it there, pays homage, pays respect. And the energy begins to work for that person because of the simple gesture of acknowledging it with kola nut. I'm telling you, because this powers was not rendered ineffective by the priest, but rather it became inaccessible. It became inaccessible to the people that participated in its disrespect, disregard, and destruction of its sacred grove. Now, let's look at factors that can render a deity ineffective. Neglect and disrespect, the first one. Now, one of the primary ways an Igbo deity can be rendered ineffective is through neglect and disrespect. Deities, they require a regular veneration and offerings to amplify the effectiveness. It also helps them to know that they are valued and we still want them to work for us. Therefore, we use these offerings and veneration as a way to maintain their connection with the physical world. Now, when worshippers fail to perform these necessary rituals or show respect, such as or we show them disrespect, such as desecrating sacred sites and objects, it is believed that the deity's power may diminish or it will be withdrawn, or it will allow you to function on your own because you have said, I do not want you to work for me. So it becomes inaccessible to you until you want it. Then you will now go through the rituals of appeasement and do the right thing, and you're going to basically reinstate the deity to its full efficacy. And this is not a loss of power. We need to note that when we disrespect or disregard or neglect these deities and even destroy their groves, and they allow it, it is not a sign of a loss of power in absolute sense, but a withdrawal of influence from those who do not show the proper regard to their relevance. Number 2, violation of taboos and sacred laws. And Igbo deities often impose specific taboos and sacred laws also that their followers must observe. Therefore, violating these can lead to the deity withholding its blessings and protection. For example, if a community fails to observe the sacredness of certain days or festivals or practice, the deity may be displeased and withdraw its support. This withdrawal is seen as a consequence of the human actions rather than a weakness in the deity, because what amplifies a deity is the sacredness of principles that it holds dear. So it is going to withdraw itself from you until you appease and you restore yourself. This is when it begins to work for you again. Now the third one is syncretism and conversion. The advent of Christianity and other religious or another religion has led to the decline in the worship of traditional deities. As communities often convert to new faiths, they often abandon or synchronize traditional practices. Now, this shift can lead to a perceived reduction of efficacy of the deity, as they are no longer actively worshipped or revered. In some cases, these deities have been reinterpreted or assimilated into the new religious framework, which can dilute its traditional roles and power. We see it happening today. This is why I have a double bias, which I tell people that I feel that because one of the tenets of the Igbo epoch of development is that at some point in our evolution, the spirits are supposed to withdraw from us and allow us to function on our own. So I guess maybe we've gotten to that point where we no longer depend on spirits to provide nourishment. We now know clearly, based on our reality, you have to work. You have to work before you're able to feed yourself and all those things. And if there is a problem, we are now able to be self-aware and able to solve some of our problems by ourselves. And culture, syncretism, conversion, even this cultural changes and modernity, all of them, modernization, all of them, they are kind of intertwined. So now looking at cultural changes and modernization, now look at the impacts of modernization and globalization has also played a role in the changing perception of Igbo deities. Therefore, as younger generations embrace new lifestyles and ideology, traditional practices may be seen to be outdated and irrelevant. And this cultural shift can lead to the erosion of traditional beliefs and their perceived ineffectiveness or effectiveness of these deities are no longer central to the community's way of life. So because of the cultural shift, the way we are now getting modernized, we could now see that many people have embraced new lifestyles and new ideologies. Therefore, we're now living under the perception or presumption that these deities are now ineffective. And because we're now seeing that ineffective, there is no good or bad response to it. Because we are now getting to be more self-aware. We're not getting to be more self-aware. This is when in a family, when there's issue of fertility, you will now see people going to fertility clinics instead of depending on our quality for that. So this is where we're talking about the cultural change and the cultural and modernization being key factors that could lead to the presumption or the perception of looking at deities and wondering if they are effective or ineffective. Cultural change and modernization has played a role in it. Now, the question of whether an Igbo deity can be rendered ineffective, it touches a broader issue of faith, cultural change, and resistance to traditional beliefs. This is why deities may be less influential due to neglect and negligence, violation of sacred laws, cultural shift. Their inherent power still remains, which is very important to note. Irrespective of all these factors, their inherent power still remains. Because even though some people will say, I've gone through fertility clinics, I've gone through this doctor and that doctor, until somebody said I should go and perform this ritual. And the moment I did it, I conceived. So you will now look at it from another perspective. Then look at it from another perspective. Well, a whole other range of people will tell you, oh, I've done these rituals and other rituals, but at the end of the day, I went to this fertility doctor and I was able to conceive. So there is no right or wrong. I guess, aside from people that say that they can destroy its power, but we're not looking at this from different perspectives. We could only say that deities are as effective as much as the relevance that we give it. The day we decide not to give it relevance, it becomes inaccessible, not destroyed, not diminished. It becomes inaccessible to me and to you. So this is what I have to say about this concept of this topic or this question of can an Igbo deity be rendered ineffective. So if I was able to give you value, or if you gained any kind of value from this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, let's have a wonderful conversation and drop your questions. I'm going to be going through the comments. Whenever I say this video, I'm going to look for comments and know if I can answer and give perspectives to it. So yeah, until next time, like I said.